Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Building More Accessible React Native Applications. I'm Carly Lamb, Senior Mobile and Full Stack Web Engineer at Aviron Software. In our last episode, we talked about the use of accessibility labels and how those can improve the user experience for users that are using assistive technologies like screen readers, while also boosting your product's SEO. Today, we're going to be talking about conscious styling choices that you can make for users that may have accessibility settings like larger text enabled on their mobile devices. We'll focus specifically on how text elements and layouts can scale effectively, ensuring that our application looks great for everyone. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so let's start out by taking a look at our application. We've got a simple to-do list application here with a header, a task input, add task button, and a privacy policy link that we can click, and we can see a modal pop up with our fake privacy policy here. In our text input, we can add some tasks here. So let's say today we need to clean the car, and we need to walk our dog, and we can check items off on our list or uncheck them as needed. We can edit items, and we can also delete items from our list. So overall, the application is very simple to use. The functionality is not complex. However, even an application this simple can have some hidden bugs for users using accessibility features. So today, we're going to discuss how conscious styling choices can make a big impact for users with larger text enabled. So first and foremost, how do you test with larger text font? Well, if you're on iOS, you're first going to start out by clicking the Settings application. From Settings, you'll click Accessibility, Display and Text Size, Larger Text, and from here, you can enable the larger accessibility sizes. So let's go ahead and enable that. Let's bump it all the way up and see how our application reacts to that. So we'll go back to our application, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a fresh refresh. And we can see after we enable the larger accessibility feature, we've got some funky UI going on. We can see our add task button. We can't see the text in it, so our button isn't adaptive to the text inside of it. Let's see how it looks whenever we add some items. So we'll add those items back, clean car and walk dog. We can see it's really difficult to work with our applications. We're working with a really small amount of real estate here. And let's see our modals. So we can see here in our modal, we can't scroll on our modal. So I have no way of closing this without closing out the entire application completely, which would be a really frustrating bug. For example, I've seen this on an application where on the initial load, the first screen that you see is a modal screen that lets you know that your location features need to be enabled. And you click the accept button from there, and after you click accept, then you're past the modal and you're in the application. Now you can see that could be a pretty big issue if the modal itself isn't scrollable and the user has their text size increased the way that we have it now. They would never know that there's an accept button or any actionable button at the bottom of the modal, which would be really frustrating because there's no way to know that unless they disable their accessibility features. And we want our application to be user-friendly for everyone. So let's get started in making this application more accessible. Okay, so we'll start out by me refreshing our application here. Okay, so we're back to our main screen. So what's the solution here? We need to make sure that the font sizes and that the layouts are dynamic so that they can adjust based on the user's accessibility preferences. And to do this, we're going to make use of a very helpful library called React Native Size Matters. So we can do this with a basic npm install. So we'll npm install React Native Size Matters. And this library is going to provide us a way to scale elements based on the device's screen size and the user's preferred text size. So this means relative sizing for fonts and other UI components. We're going to be focusing on three main methods: scale, moderate scale, and vertical scale. So first and foremost, working with scale. Scale is used mainly to adjust the size of elements proportional to the screen width. So it's going to be best suited for elements that need to resize in relation to the screen width, like buttons, icons, and other UI elements. So let's take a look at this button first and foremost. Let's find our Add Task button. There it is here. And let's take a look inside of the styling for this button. So we can see that this button has got a fixed width and a fixed height to it. Let's start out with that fixed width. So instead of having this at 250, we're going to use that scale method now coming from our React Native Size Matters library. And we're going to go ahead and pass it that 250 now. 250. And we'll save that. So we can see that the width changed just a little bit. Not much to notice yet. But basically, we use this scale whenever we want the size of a UI element to scale proportionally to the screen width. So this is especially useful whenever you need elements to stay in proportion to the screen, but not necessarily match the actual screen dimensions. So it's a good default for most elements. So after we add this scale to the width of our button, now it's going to scale the button's width relative to the screen width. So next, let's talk about the vertical scale. So we can adjust this height here as well. So the vertical scale is specifically designed to scale vertically based on the screen's height. So it's really helpful when you want to ensure that there's consistent vertical spacing and dimensions regardless of the screen's width. So this is particularly useful for elements like heights, margins, and padding, or really any vertical component of the UI. So let's edit the height of this button now, and we're going to use the vertical scale. And let's give it a little bit of room to breathe. So let's bump that up just a little bit. And perfect. So now we can see that our add task button is dynamically stretching the height of it based on the text and the real estate that that text needs on that button. Awesome. So vertical scale is for elements that are sensitive to vertical dimensions, like button heights, margin between rows, and vertical padding. So it ensures that those vertical elements don't look too small on tall screens or too large on short screens. And next, let's go ahead and talk about that moderate scale. So moderate scale is a more controlled scaling function compared to scale that we see here. So it's going to adjust the size of an element based on the screen's width, but also considers a scaling factor to prevent the size from becoming too large or too small. So here's our header element here. Let's take a look at the header text styling. And we can see we've got this fixed text size. So for our font sizes, let's use that moderate scaling now. So we'll use moderate scale. And it looks like we need to import that. So we'll use our IntelliSense. So update import from React Native size matters. Awesome. Give that a refresh. And just a subtle difference, but makes a big difference depending on the device that you're using. So let's go ahead and adjust those other font sizes as well. Perfect. So moderate scale is great for font sizes because it allows your text to scale well on large devices, but won't make it too large or too small on very small devices. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on building more accessible React Native applications. Today, we went through just a couple simple ways that you can make some conscious styling choices to make your application more user-friendly and adaptive for users with larger text sizes. We went through how to test larger text sizes on iOS, React Native Size Matters, a library that you can use to help with scaling items on your application, as well as the importance of scrollability on things like modals. Little things like this make a big impact for users. Our goal is to make sure that our applications are not just compliant, but that they're awesome for everyone. So let's build more accessible applications together. Happy coding!